Emovis Ireland is a leading provider of mobility-based solutions. They make the complicated easy because they believe in the freedom of going places. And today we're going to meet Alan Murphy from Smart Dublin. Alan leads Smart Dublin's team to provide technology for better services such as mobility. Alan,
Aidan,
how are you?
All right.
Pleasure to meet you. Jump aboard.
Thank you.
How are you, sir?
Not bad.
Good day for a spin.
Yes, this is it.
Okay, you get yourself comfortable and we'll go off on a nice drive around Dublin
Okay.
and we'll have a good chat about transport, where it's
This is
at
it,
and where
yeah.
it's headed, and mobility,
Yeah.
and also your personal role in it with Smart Dublin. So will we start with the easy stuff?
Okay, yeah, gosh, okay, yeah.
This should be the easy stuff
Keep
for
the
you.
hard stuff to the end, yeah.
What is Smart Dublin?
Smart Dublin. Okay, so we are an initiative of the 4 Dublin local authorities, and we are exploring smart city technology, basically to try and get Dublin to run more efficiently. So mobility will be a big part of our world, trying to get people to move around the city better.
Okay, so is your background in technology?
Yeah, I've been doing technology for a long time. So a lot of technology consulting previously, and joined the Smart Dublin team about a year ago. Yeah.
Okay, and how long has Smart Dublin been in existence?
It's maybe 4 years.
Okay,
thereabouts.
so it's relatively new.
Yeah. The whole smart city space is relatively new. Probably 2010, 2011 is when it kind of really started to take off globally. And basically any city you can think of is doing something in the smart city space.
Okay.
So mobility, environmental controls, energy efficiency, citizen engagement, smart government digital services, that's kind of the scope of smart city.
So it's a new way of looking at things and a new way to try and tackle things and make them better?
Absolutely, yeah. It's all about challenging the status quo. Whatever things happen in the city, is there a way to improve how, let's say, local government delivers some of its public services? And transport, of course, is, affects all of us. So that's a big ticket item in any city. Congestion, big problem. Air quality, big problem. So we can see it in Dublin today. We've got congestion all around us.
So what's the role of Smart Dublin within that? Is it to provide the research? Is it to provide the solutions? Is it to provide action?
Yeah, we're kind of the innovation catalyst, if you want to call it that. So what's happening in the transport sector? There's a lot of disruption happening, a lot of new entrants into the market. They're coming knocking on our door, wondering what can they do in Dublin. So think micromobility. I think everybody's got an opinion on scooters, for example.
Yeah, well, we've seen a few of them already today.
Yeah, so we might come on to that later on. But
what do you think of them?
I'm a fan. However, they've got to be regulated, and strategically they make sense and would add huge value to a city like Dublin, where congestion and getting around the city is a big issue. However, there's a need to regulate them and make sure that they're used properly. So rider behaviour needs to be properly monitored and so on. So yeah.
Okay, so new technologies like this come along and they come to you and say, how do we make this happen? How do we integrate?
Exactly. How do we do something in Dublin? How can we do a pilot project together? That kind of stuff. And when it comes to tackling some of the big urban challenges we're dealing with, the innovation only happens through collaboration. So the way we work is we're the local government sort of voice in this conversation. We will work with the relevant stakeholders locally to tackle that urban challenge. So let's say transport. We will work with the obvious players, the National Transport Authority, the transport operators like Dublin Bus, Irish Rail, etc. We will work with the new disruptors like the car clubs, the carpooling companies, maybe micromobility in the future. We will work with all those stakeholders to figure out how can we tackle this challenge together. So we see ourselves kind of as the facilitator or a catalyst of that kind of process.
Okay. So do you work for the government as such?
Local government, yeah. We're funded by the 4 Dublin local authorities. So Dublin City Council, Fingal, Dún Laoghaire, Rathdown and South Dublin County Council. They came together and recognised that let's tackle these kind of challenges as a group, look at it from the greater Dublin area perspective as opposed to just the city centre. So that the topic of congestion and mobility affects the city centre as well as the suburbs, obviously. So everybody feels it in the Dublin region,
Okay, so you a conduit then from the government's plan and ideas to the people, the customers, and also then the various stakeholders.
Yeah, and the stakeholders I mentioned, I mentioned a lot of the public transport stakeholders, but another big part of our ecosystem are the research organisations. You asked about research before, so we'd work with all the universities, identifying research opportunities around these projects. And then a big part of what we do is working with industry, so think the big tech companies as well as tech startups as well. So we've got this ecosystem of tapping into the relevant stakeholder on a project by project basis. So that's what we do.
So how big is technology, the technology sector within transport, and how much bigger is it getting year by year?
That's an interesting question. Maybe I could flip it around. I would say that the transport sector is something now that the technology industry has got its eye on. In other words, a lot of other industries have been disrupted massively by technology. Think online banking, for example, or booking airline tickets. I think the transport sector now is in a good way under the eye of in the eye of the technology sector. So when you hear terms like mobility as a service, these are terms kind of that are technology-led terms with a view to coming up with a proposal on how the transport sector could be disrupted for the better good. That transport becomes more integrated, more joined up. The user experience is better, and people are persuaded to move away from, let's say, car ownership to using public transport more, or using sort of a multimodal ways of getting around the city. So the transport sector is seeing a lot of change, and there's a lot of opportunities for technology and transport to come together.
But you see it as a happy marriage, and the motives of the tech industry are virtuous and good for consumers and for mobility.
Look, private technology companies, there's a commercial opportunity, of course, but the kind of proposals and the kind of things we'll talk about now have to address a problem, have to address a city problem. And for sure, things like shared mobility should help congestion issues. The movement towards the electrification of cars will help air quality. So those are two big issues in Dublin in particular. And so we're exploring all these new technologies to address real problems.
So what exciting things can you tell us that you're working on in Smart Dublin at the moment, and innovations?
So we've a number of projects happening in the mobility space. We've done an internal project within the local authorities called a Smart Mobility Hub. So what that is, providing a fleet of electric vehicles, e-bikes, as well as regular pedal bikes to internal local authority staff. So in Dublin City Council or in Dún Laoghaire, Rathdown, for example, there's a lot of roles and staff that have to move around the city during the day. So think planners, architects, engineers, and so on. Through this mobility hub, we're offering them an alternative to their personal car, so they can leave their car at home, and then they have a mode of transport which is a sustainable mode of transport to go to wherever site they need to go to. So they just simply book one of these based on their preference, an e-bike or an electric vehicle or a regular push bike. Cargo bikes hopefully might be in there for the next phase, and then they can book that for an hour or more, and then go to their location, do their business, and then bring it back to the hub for the next person to use.
Okay. So what's the uptake been like, or the initial reaction to it? Did people welcome it?
Yeah, good user satisfaction kind of response. Plans are now to expand it to other council locations. Again, it's very much an internal project to kind of nudge staff behaviour, just to think differently about how they're going to get from one location to the other during the day. So that's been a success, and there's going to be more activity there. The local authorities have a role to play in terms of where we're going to put EV charging points around the city. So there's a big push by the government as well as car manufacturers to move towards EVs and plug-in hybrids and so on. 80% of charging of EVs will happen at home. So, but people's homes have different characteristics, and you may not always have off-street parking to charge your electric vehicle. So think terraced houses, for example. So what's going to happen to a whole row of terraced houses, and those people own electric vehicles in the future? How is that going to happen? Are cables going to be over the front garden, over the footpath, and plugged into your car? There's an issue there. So according to the characteristics of different neighbourhoods, the local authorities can play a role in installing charging points in the right places according to the characteristics of the neighbourhood. The ESB will do the fast charges for the motorways and so on. So just it's more in the suburban areas. There's a role to identify the optimal locations for these charging points. So that's something we're looking at. We supported Free Now on a launch around matching
the taxi app.
Matching passengers who request a taxi. So if I'm at the airport and you're at the airport, we don't know each other, but we're both going to
okay, so we can carpool.
We can come together.
It's kind of like Uber do that in the States, right?
Yeah, that's it, exactly, yeah. So it's called Free Now Match. So again, savings there on vehicle kilometres travelled by one of us, and therefore carbon emissions by one of us if we're together in a taxi. There's that. Last mile logistics is another project.
Last mile
logistics. So these are your white vans that hit the city centre typically in the morning, do the deliveries. They pull up, hazard lights go on, they offload wherever they're offloading. At the moment it's a bit ad hoc and things can get a bit messy, and if a guy is doing a delivery and he pulls up and parks in the wrong place, there can be a huge impact on bus lanes, and congestion gets impacted. So we're trying to look at ways to manage the loading bays better for those last mile logistics. So that's another project. So congestion can be caused not just by a high volume of cars moving around the city, but by simply somebody pulling over on a tight street and doing this kind of stuff.
Sure, yeah, and even we're on Stephen's Green now. It's a place where it can easily happen. So dore's last mile
logistics
last mile just deliveries pertain to the white van man doing the deliveries, or
it's deliveries?
Is it a concept?
It's not just white vans as well, but think your FedExes, your UPSs.
I understand. So it's within the delivery.
The big courier
sector.
company, even on Post would be doing a lot of deliveries as well. So we're working with UPS actually. They're prototyping new vehicles. Again, all zero emission stuff that can be used in certain streets or down, let's say, a pedestrian street at certain times of the day. So they're not. So for the delivery of their parcels, they don't have to use a van. There's alternative transport that can be used. So there's different ways to tackle that problem. But yeah, it's trying to make that whole last mile delivery scheduling more efficient, so that it doesn't have the effect on the city as it currently does.
Okay, what about individual transport users? How they could play a part in improving their own commute to work, but also playing their part in helping the environment as well, that they live within and work within.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of helping the environment, the switch to EVs is getting a lot of attention, and that absolutely helps the air quality issue I mentioned. You'd question, though, there's about 2 million, just over 2 million private cars in Ireland at the moment. The congestion issue probably won't be addressed if everybody just moves from 2 million petrol and diesel cars to 2 million electric vehicles. We're kind of just back to the same situation.
We still have the volume.
We still have the same volume. So what individuals can do, and indeed what organizations can do, so think big employers with thousands of employees, anything that promotes shared mobility has to be welcomed. So simple things like carpooling at work, and incentivizing people to carpool make an awful lot of sense. We're looking at it from a citywide perspective, but everybody can, and within their organization, could not change their behavior, hopefully with incentives thrown in per organization, to just get people to combine and travel to work together through carpooling schemes. That would be one simple way to really help the congestion issues we have. In parallel to that, and one way to go about that for organizations is to do a kind of an as-is assessment. Well, how are their staff getting to work at the moment? We might have a perception that staff commute to work in a certain way, but you can be amazed what the data can present. And if you understand how staff currently commute to work and how they maybe move around during the day for work reasons, you can come up with ideas on how to promote shared mobility. So it could be things like, if there's a lot of people coming from Wicklow at the same time, travelling into a certain organisation around the same time and leaving at the same time, is a shuttle bus a runner, for example? Anything, again, just to challenge, okay, do we want Aidan or Alan individually getting a bit stressed out and driving to work, or could we provide something different? So they're very simple ways to change.
So is there corporate responsibility there?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
But then what, as an individual, if I go, I don't want to get the bus with Alan. I like driving my car and listening to me music. Or
Look, I know. There's all of that. I mean, recent focus groups and surveys that we've done is that people are generally up for it. You're going to have exceptions that people just say, look, I'm sticking to my guns here. I like my privacy, and I got to drop the kids off or whatever, that they can't maybe sign up to something like this. But with the whole environmental agenda happening now, it's an easier persuasion, I think, or an easier conversation to have to persuade people to do this.
And are we, as a society, are we getting better, do you think? Are we open to the right changes that need to be made, as well as changes that will hopefully improve the individuals' lives, that it's for the greater good as well?
Yeah, I think there's got to be some incentive as part of the conversation. So, if you're to do carpooling at your place of work, the people behind the scheme need to think carefully about, what could be the incentives for people signing up to this scheme. And it could be something very simple like car parking spaces. In some organisations is a real issue, that there aren't enough car park spaces, right? And in fact, some of the new builds that you'll see around, there won't be a case of, well, we're going to have 5,000 employees there equals 5,000 car park spaces. That's a thing of the past. So a simple incentive could be, if you carpool, we guarantee you a car park space at work, or maybe a priority car park space if you've got multiple floors in your basement or so on, or a free coffee, or free membership to the gym, or whatever it might be. I think each organisation can figure out the kind of incentives that will sort of get the attention of the employees.
Or, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Could it go the other way, that it's like, well, Alan, if you want that parking space and work, you're actually going to have to pay for it. Otherwise, you'll have to get the carpool bus with everyone else, or the shuttle bus with everyone else.
This is
so
it.
That you'll not be penalised for it, but if you want it, you're going to have to pay for it.
Negative incentive, maybe.
Is that what you call it in the business? Yeah, perhaps.
No,
and then,
it's carrot and stick stuff. So yeah, that would be a stick. But then other countries take it up to the macro level, that you place a taxation value on people carpooling. So you might actually get tax credits. This all have to be figured out, and the technology can help to validate that Aidan and Alan went together from Wicklow to, I don't know, AIB. Let's say we're working on AIB. That gets validated. We did it 100 times during the course of the year. That, a bit like the cycle to work scheme. You can get some central government to get bought into this sort of, okay, well, let's reward people through the taxation process.
Do you think that's possibly
that could be a bit of a leap, but
coming
it's
with new policy?
Conceptually, it's happening in other places. It's a conversation to be had here. So
we need to be open-minded.
Yep.
So as a city, generally, I mean, we've got some of the biggest tech companies in the world. We've a very diverse, vibrant population. How do you view Dublin as a tech city, as a smart city on a whole?
We're doing good. I mean, there's a great buzz around Dublin, I have to say. In terms of a smart city, I think we're doing really well. I think the ecosystem I described, the tech companies, so split that into the big companies as well as the startups, the research organizations who have a lot of funding actually to look at smart city technology. Plus, what I'm seeing is a big push from central government as well as local government to challenge the status quo, to look at things differently. And then the citizens, I mean, when I talk to people about what I do, it's an hour later, I'm kind of like, okay, that's great feedback. It gets people engaged when you talk about things like mobility and environmental issues and so on. So, combine those kind of groups of stakeholders together, we got a good ecosystem at Smart Dublin, as well as the community, let's say, within the transport sector. We all want to kind of tackle this challenge. So Dublin is well positioned to innovate in this space. It's also a nice size as well. It's not too big, not too small. You could call it the kind of Goldilocks smart city size. It's got a critical mass that
I like it. Is that the code name for us in the office? Goldilocks.
I just came up with that a bit right now, but
it's got a nice sounding name to it.
It's big enough to attract some of the big tech players. They kind of see the commercial kind of opportunity, if you want to call it that.
But it's not on London.
It's not, and it's not on London. So, like, London has 33 boroughs, and the smart city guys there are trying to work with 33 institutions. So, sort of counterpart of me, for example, we've got 4, it's more manageable. Now, it's not like in the States where you have a mayor that kind of says, "We're doing this," and it's that kind of single point of contact. Or Singapore would have a similar kind of CEO kind of role. So there's a bit more stakeholder conversations need to happen here, but I think it's very doable. Yeah.
Okay. Well, seeing as we're parked in traffic right opposite the Dublin bike scheme, on, where are we? Was this Marion Square? Marion Square.
Yeah.
At, what time is it? 3:33. All the bikes are there. Is that normal? Should they not all be in use? I know we're between rush hours. I'm just curious.
I'm guessing people are working. The Dublin bike scheme has been a huge success.
Okay.
There was huge doubts about it. I mean, 10 years ago, people would have kind of laughed at you like, "Oh, a shared bike, mad." But no, it got initiated. Why is that rack full? I'm guessing people are at work.
That wasn't any sort of an observation. I was just curious.
Yeah. So it's been a huge success. There's So the evolution of the bike share scheme is interesting. So you might have heard of Bleeper Bike as well. They're another scheme that are in town. So we're going from docked stations like you have there, where you had to dockless stations. Like Bleeper Bike have a fleet around town, so you can basically park your bike anywhere. You don't have to park it there. So again, a shift in terms of that mobility service, moving from a static location to a sort of more free moving model. And there's going to be another player in town called Mobi. And both Mobi and Bleeper Bike are going to introduce e-bikes into their fleet. And that's another game changer as well. So at the moment, the bikes here are used for short trips, maybe half a kilometre, maybe a kilometre kind of max. The e-bikes kind of nudges behaviour even more. I mean, the range of the e-bikes can go beyond 50 kilometres. So it'd be interesting to see, with a shared e-bike scheme, where will people actually be commuting from? You'd hope that it might get people out of their cars and they travel in from the suburbs, for example.
And that would be their daily commute.
That could be their daily commute, yeah. Or they through a shared public fleet, through the city scheme, they go, oh, I like this e-bike thing, I'm going to buy my own. So it ticks the box again for us of addressing congestion and air quality, obviously.
So where are we lacking?
Probably to join up all these different services is an item on my table at the moment.
And by that, do you mean, as a consumer, they're all under the one app? Or?
That's sort of the tip of the iceberg. So
okay.
I mentioned mobility as a service or MaaS earlier on. So we're looking at what other cities are doing in this space, and if I have a map of Europe on a portal that shows practically every city in Europe is looking at this topic. And Dublin is the outlier. So fingers crossed we can get this kind of initiative up and running in Dublin. And it needs the kind of stakeholders I mentioned earlier on. But what it'll do, or aspires to do, because it's kind of early days yet to see the benefits come through, it'll basically, if you think across all the transport operators in Dublin, so your public transport guys, which is the bus, the rail, the Lewis, throw in then the new operators like Bleeper Bike and Mobi, the bike sharing schemes I mentioned. If we get micro mobility regulated, that's another player. So that if I want to go from A to B, I have a reliable alternative, possibly over different modes of transport, and I can pay and buy the relevant tickets I need via one single app or one single experience. And then you start getting into stuff like, well, what are Alan's preferences in getting from A to B? Is there certain bundles that Alan would be happy to sign up for? Akin to the telco industry, the whole all-you-can-eat transport kind of stuff. Would that be appealing to the Dublin resident? So what's happening in places like Helsinki and Berlin, and we were there recently, is they've got these apps up and running, and they're starting to see real traction, and sort of playing with the bundles and the customer incentives about, see, it's becoming more personalized, that transport experience. The concern would be if that's the kind of software and experience and app that integrates all these operations, there's still a need to make sure that the hardware,
and I guess that's where we come back down to earth, maybe with a little bang and go, okay, reality. and so what needs to happen first for all this amazing technology to come into play and improve our experience?
So look, you hit the nail on the head. We've all been to Western European cities, and you've experienced public transport there in particular, and you kind of think, be nice if we had an underground, or things came on time or whatever. there's a need for both to complement each other, but there's a huge opportunity even just to integrate the existing operators. And then we know that there's huge capex investment happening in the public transport space anyway. The new planned metro, extensions to DART carriages, as in the train, additional carriages on the trains, more light rail investment in the greater Dublin area. So this new stuff is happening, and wouldn't it be great that new hardware is happening, if you like, to wrap better integrated software around that to again provide an optimal user experience. So both have to complement each other. Yeah.
And is it happening quick enough? Is it happening successfully enough? Seamlessly enough?
Yeah, well, that's down to organisations like us to make this happen. The appetite is there. I mean, the people in the local transport community here are very switched on to what's happening internationally. Any conference you would go to, this topic of mass is getting a lot of attention. So, I think there's good awareness in Dublin around these initiatives, and it's just figuring out, okay, well, what would be the next steps for Dublin, and we're part of that conversation. And you get the right stakeholder buy-in, and you sort of test the water with customers. Is this something that they would like? And I think conceptually, I think it makes sense.
That the appetite is there from all parties.
I think the desire is there, and it just needs to be given a push and a formal initiation, if you like. Yeah.
Okay, are you a man to make predictions?
Go on, yeah.
5 years.
Sporting ones or transport related?
Well, they're ones we definitely have no influence over. But perhaps you do over the landscape of Dublin as a smart city, and in terms of mass over the next 5 years.
5 years.
In 5 years' time.
Yeah.
2024. What's different?
On the topic of mass, I think what's different is we would have piloted something in the mass space. Now, whether we've gone fully public and live with a mass service for Dublin, question mark. But we've learned by doing so. That's actually sort of a mantra at Smart Dublin. We do a lot of projects just by doing stuff, putting sensor on a street pole or on a traffic light, and just see, okay, what kind of information, what do we learn from actually deploying something in the real life environment. So that's what I would love to see happen quite soon, actually, in the mass area, is that we get a pilot project up and running, we learn from it, and then we say, okay, this seems to be working. It seems to be working technically as well as culturally. The Dublin residents are buying into this, and then away we go. So that would be fantastic to see. And then obviously, hopefully the planned capital expenditure in the public transport area that feeds into Project Ireland 2040, the metro I mentioned, and maybe additions to the light rail infrastructure and so on. Bus Connects is another big project, that they all sort of progress as planned, and then the EV move as well. Hopefully we'll see more transition to EVs. So yeah, probably those three things over the next 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you optimistic?
We're stuck in traffic.
Yeah, I know.
In a yellow junction box.
Once I saw you look at, he's very aware that we are stuck in the middle, and we are part of the transport problem, not the solution right now.
Yeah.
Right, hang on. Yeah.
I know they're not regulated officially just yet, but we'd be flying around town on a couple of scooters, wouldn't we?
Have you been on one?
I was in another city.
What are they like?
Yeah, they're great. I mean, they're zippy. There's one little thing from research to look out for is what we don't want is that kind of micro mobility to the detriment of walking and cycling. So active healthy options.
Yeah. You
And
just become lazy and go, why walk when you can scoot when it's still only a kilometre?
Yeah, exactly. So, but that's kind of down to personal choice as well. You'd hope that people are kind of savvy on active lifestyle as well. So, it's a small unintended consequences that we need to watch out for.
Are the behaviours of different citizens or different cities' citizens, do they differ greatly?
That's a good question.
Habitually, culturally?
You'd probably have to say yes. I mean, how people, Finnish people in, operating in Helsinki would be different to, Berlin. They're the two cities I've been to recently. So, I mean, culturally they're different, and expectations will be different, I think, as well, in terms of public transport as well, and the attitude towards public transport, which by the way would need to be the backbone of any mobility as a service solution. So back to the challenge you posed about, we got to get that right as part of the software service.
Also have to make people nicer to let you in on the roads.
Yeah.
Including our taxi drivers. Thanks, man.
Yeah. The other cultural aspect, because in Dublin, unfortunately, there's a huge dependency on the car. Google released something called the Environmental Insights Explorer, EIE. You should look it up after this.
Okay.
Now, what they've gathered over 2018 is all journeys, if you want to call it that, in and out and around the Dublin City Council area, so the city centre primarily. 68% of those journeys were done by car. And if I was a betting man, which I'm not, but anyway, I'd say the majority of those trips are probably single occupancy vehicles, so people on their own in a car. Back to the whole issue around congestion and the lack of shared mobility. So that's an interesting bit of analysis to build on. This huge opportunity there to try and get people out of the cars based on that data. I think to the cultural point, because there's a high dependency on the car, we have to, if we want to do any of this, we have to provide something as reliable or as compelling as the convenience of your car. It's so it kind of answers the cultural thing, but it's just highlighting that in Dublin that we just have this car dependency stuff.
I wonder, is it similar to this innate Irish thing about owning property? And you go to any other European city and everyone rents, and that's the way it is. Maybe it's not going to be as hard to get people out of their cars as it is to try and.
Maybe, it's it might be down to a perception that getting from A to B, this is the best way for me to do it, is by my car. But then what you might find, just people aren't aware of even existing public transport or alternatives to get from A to B. Delivering a more integrated solution via mobility as a service, and at the same time, if we were to launch something like that, just creating a whole awareness campaign around it, should sort of chip away at the cultural issue about the car ownership stuff. A sidebar to that is the transition from a petrol or diesel car to an EV car now is the perfect time to kind of intercept that decision-making process. Like we touched earlier on, that we don't want another 2.1 million electric vehicles in 2030, let's say. So the buying decision to switch from a petrol or diesel to an EV is happening for a lot of people in the next few years. So imagine if we could get our act together through something that doesn't require car ownership or car sharing or whatever you want to call it, to intercept that buying decision, so that people actually don't go off and buy a new electric vehicle and perpetuate the
Is that
issue.
time coming around now?
I think it's already upon us. You're seeing a lot of push from even central government is promoting funding for electric vehicles. There's a lot of it's in the climate action plan. That they want 1 million of these by 2030. So there's a lot of media push and political push happening there. But you got to look at it differently. Well, if that unfolds, if that's successful, we still have this congestion issue. So
there has to be better thinking than just let's get everyone in an EV.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's just one part of the jigsaw.
So does all this, does it excite you? How does it make you feel when you look at that map in your war room?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, it's not. It's to be in a job where you get to tackle a global challenge like mobility in cities. I mean, yeah, it puts a spring in your step. I have to say, it's inspirational, and like I said, most cities, certainly in Western Europe, are looking at this. So you get to engage and learn from those other cities.
Is it quite collaborative?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, very much so. Because this is a global problem. Like it all feeds into
it's the planet's
quality of
problem,
life and and the whole greenhouse gas stuff. So yeah, it is exciting. Yeah.
If you could change one thing, only one, right now. I'm sure you've laid about it, like, if only we could do that. That would solve that.
Right. Well, we haven't talked about cycling much, so I cycle every day.
Okay.
I would make the cycling infrastructure in Dublin better. Probably the reason you see the cycle lane here. It just runs out, kind of. It doesn't really go anywhere. But one of the reasons why more people don't cycle is safety reasons. If you're going along this street, you have this cycle lane here that's just painted. There's no barrier between that lane
and the other couple of lanes of traffic,
road, right? Yeah. So, and look, this is just a legacy issue. A lot of Western European cities are old. They've grown organically, and if you had a chance to redesign Dublin from scratch, there's a lot of stuff.
It's like
wouldn't look like this.
The Sims computer game, isn't
it? yeah, and we actually have tools like digital twins and 3D models,
which is something similar, is it?
Yeah, which allows us to kind of do these simulations. But anyway, the question about the cycling infrastructure. So safety is a big concern, and it's a big concern amongst women in particular, cycling or as their commute. So that's 50% of the population. So that's why one of the reasons why cycling numbers are so low. So if we manage to, we can't do this all at once, but for the optimal routes of people commuting into the city centre, have better segregated cycle lanes, I think you would see an uptake in cycling, which obviously is healthy, it's sustainable. It could be linked to some rewards through work that we mentioned earlier on, etc., etc. So let's start with that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
They have that in London, do they?
The cycling isn't great in London either.
I thought I saw in a programme once they had, and it was like a segregated corridor with some form of barrier protection. I could be imagining it now, but
they probably.
But is that the kind of vision?
Yeah, there's that. But then you go to the likes of the Netherlands, and they've just got cycling sorted. I mean, cycling takes priority on the streets.
Okay.
This is all about prioritization. So at the moment on this street, the car has priority.
Wins.
Yeah. And priority should be given to buses or cycling or whatever the more sustainable mode of transport is going to happen. I saw amazing footage in South Korea. There was a motorway, so I think the M50, right? And there was a cycle lane down the middle of it,
Okay.
with solar panels on top, so fully segregated from the motorway, obviously. But there was a cycle lane down the middle intersection of the motorway, with solar panels on top, generating electricity for whatever they need it for, but offering full protection left, right, and on top for cyclists.
Wow. And it probably charges your phone while you're going through it as well. That's
And you're
amazing.
looking at this going, wow.
It's futuristic,
Yeah.
and
So-
idealistic.
Yeah, but doable, with the political will, obviously financial investment, and the right urban design, you can do this stuff.
Okay. Well, I wish you all the best
Okay.
with all of it.
Well, you got to be part of it. I mean, you're a customer, you're a user, you move around the city, so you're part of the conversation as well. That's the way we have to look at it, you know.
Well, it must play our part.
Yeah. That's it.
All right, Alan, well, thank you very much.
Okay.
It's been really interesting.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.